Good day to you. This is we're at the beginning of June, and I'm continuing and doing kind of the follow up to my review of the movie Pearl Harbor. So, if you watched the review of Pearl Harbor, I tied the reason for my review to the fact that the movie came out the weekend after I graduated from high school. And this is kind of breaking my rule that for this year, and it's kind of probably going to be my ongoing rule because it's been really helpful. I've been doing movies that came out in years that ended in six. It's actually been helpful to do this because it gives a bit of variety in the movies and the shows I'm reviewing and reacting to. And movies I probably wouldn't review or watch otherwise, and so I kind of like the way that's going. But I'm breaking the rule just for this weekend because on account of my high school reunion, my 25 years graduated from high school, and so Shrek. Pearl Harbor was the movie that came out the week after I graduated from high school, and I released that for for Memorial Day weekend, so it's kind of a double purpose. But I wanted to go back and look at the movie that was released the weekend that I did graduate from high school, and that movie is Shrek. And let me start. So let's watch the trailer here for what the movie was.
Princess, where are you? It's very spooky in here. I ain't playing no games.
Well, at least we know where the princess is. But where's a
DreamWorks Pictures invites you to a land of fairy tales.
Hey! Oh, no. Dead girl off the table!
Where are we supposed to put her? The bed's taken.
What?
Where an unlikely hero
You definitely need some Tic Tacs or something, because your breath stinks!
rescues a fair princess
You didn't slay the dragon?
It's on my to-do list.
from a nasty villain with the help of his trusty companion.
This is gonna be fun. We can stay up late, swapping manly stories, and in the morning, I'm making waffles.
This summer, one name spells action.
You're not exactly what I expected.
One name spells adventure.
How about him? Before this is over, I'm gonna need a whole lot of serious therapy.
One name
Don't look down.
Shrek, I'm looking down!
spells romance.
It's no way to behave in front of a princess. Ooh, wow. She's as nasty as you are. Come on!
There's an arrow in your butt!
And that name is
Shrek.
Shrek?
Thank you very much. I'm here till Thursday.
Mike Myers, Eddie Murphy, Cameron Diaz, John Lithgow.
You love this woman, don't you?
Yes.
You wanna hold her?
Yes.
Please her? Yes! Then you got to try a little tenderness.
Shrek.
So there is the trailer to the movie Shrek, and watching the trailer, I kind of realized they gave way too much in that trailer. But anyways, I guess it's a kid's movie, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'm going to take you back. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I graduated from high school in 2001, and it was the same weekend that this movie was released. And so that means, yes, this movie is 25 years old now, all right? And it actually, as I mentioned with the Pearl Harbor movie, it came out shortly after I started working at a movie theater. And so I started working at a movie theater, and I remember this. This was a movie that lasted in the theaters a long time. Pearl Harbor did not last, and hardly anybody went to see it. But Shrek, because it was a kids' movie, and it was a surprising success, it lasted a long time, and that means cleaning up after kids' movies was a chore. And that trailer where it had that makes me want to dance, that little song, I'm like, oh man, I hear that song, I automatically feel like I'm cleaning in the movie theater because I heard that song so many times it got stuck in my head for weeks. But anyways, the movie Shrek was, like I said, it was in contrast to Pearl Harbor. So like I said, Pearl Harbor the week after was a disaster. cinematic disaster. And I don't mean, obviously, Pearl Harbor, the event itself is obviously a tragedy. But the movie was a tragedy. Because of, and you could go back to my review and see what I mean by that. Shrek was the opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, it wasn't a Disney movie. DreamWorks is the one who did it, if I remember correctly. Was it DreamWorks? Hold on, I gotta pause. So yeah, people were just starting to get to know DreamWorks as a studio. I mean, you hadn't had How to Train Your Dragon and other type of movies out yet. Shrek was kind of the thing that got it going, because at this point, the only player in the game when it came to animated films was Disney. And, you know, by some extension, Pixar. Which I know that's part of Disney, but there's... Yeah, anyways. So people really did not have high expectations on this. I mean, it had Eddie Murphy. It had Mike Myers, Cameron Diaz. You know, well-known actors, but... Yeah, so I remember we went to see... I remember the employees showing of it, and we all watched it. It was great. And the thing is Shrek is kind of your quintessential... It is definitely a Gen X children's movie. And when I say this, because the 90s... basically, I'd say basically about... probably about 91, 92-ish... You could definitely tell there's a shift in the way with the tone of film, and it's kind of a shift that carries to some degree into the mid 2000s, and that is the shift where basically your Gen X is running the show in terms of movies, and your older Gen X is kind of starting to take over in the early 90s. And it carries into the 2000s, and kind of the Gen X's parents are kind of starting to have influence. And like I said, Shrek is kind of a model of this. Because think about the animated movies in the 80s and 90s. You had like Lion King, you had Aladdin, you had A Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, all these films where they got the fairy tale romance and everything is happily ever after, and you're going to get that with Shrek, but Shrek is a little bit jaded. It's a little bit, and there's definitely innuendos scattered throughout the movie. There is humor in there that your kids are hopefully not catching. If they are, parents, you got to rethink how you're talking to your kids or figure out what they're watching. But there's humor that's definitely adult humor. But it's veiled in a way that kids won't readily recognize it. That's very Gen X-ish. You kind of have that little reference. You have little bit of references to things again that the parents would recognize that the kids wouldn't. I kind of loved at the end of the trailer there. I loved where Eddie Murphy kind of who is Donkey. He channels. You can tell he's channeling James Brown, and like, got to have some tenderness. And if you ever watched Saturday Night Live, that was one of his bits, and I kind of like that callback. But like I said, it is interesting. It's like, I mean, it's 25 years later. When I watched that movie in 2001, when it first came out, so I was about to graduate from high school. I was very much at that age where I recognized the sophomoric adult humor, kind of the raunchy humor. I recognized it in the movie, and I laughed at it. And so it's kind of the awkward thing I'm sure was going on, where parents were laughing at things that kids weren't. And it's like, Mom, Dad, what are you laughing at? What are you chuckling about? But now, 25 years later, I don't know why, but I don't laugh at those jokes the way I used to. You know, maybe it's because I'm too old now. Either way, I didn't laugh at them anymore. But the thing is even still, it is still a good movie. It still holds up. It's still got a good story, good plot, good voice acting. And it doesn't really waste time. It moves quickly through the story. I mean, it's out exactly 1 hour 30 minutes, which is really impressive that they got exactly at that time. I love the music is great. I mean, it starts out with, so the composer is the same guy that composed, I think it's, what is it, Henry Grayson Williams or something like that. I think that's the composer. It's the same guy that composed Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. An underrated composer, in my opinion. He doesn't do a lot of stuff. But anyways, starts out with this nice, like, kind of this stereotypical fairy tale music, which I will have to acknowledge something here. I do think Shrek is leaning a little bit on Robin Hood Men in Tights, because that music is kind of reminiscent of some of the music you get in Robin Hood Men in Tights, which itself kind of pokes fun a little bit at some of the Disney stuff. And there is a scene where they do have Robin Hood and they're doing the dancing and everything, and I'm like, I get what I know you guys are, you could tell right there, they are very, very aware of Robin Hood Men in Tights, and they're trying to allude to it, but the problem is, that is the one part where I'm like, that is admittedly the one dud moment. One of the dud moments in the film, because it's like, I'm like, I know you're nodding to it, but Mel Brooks did that. You're men do women in tight do. They did it so well. It's seared into our memory. At least in 2001. It kind of falls flat, at least for us. I guess the kids probably wouldn't know any different, but adults are like, yeah, this is kind of falling flat. But anyways, like going back to the music thing, is so I like it starts out with this nice little do 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 or whatever, and then it kicks into All Star, which is, All Star, and I Don't Give a Dang About My Reputation is another song that comes a little bit later. Those are quintessential, again, Gen X songs. Rebel, jaded, trying to go against the culture, that type of thing. That is just kind of defines Generation X, and that's coming through Shrek. And so this is one of those things where this is why one of the things with film is every movie is art. It's an artwork, and it's an art form, and it does tell you something about the world of the time that was written in. And like I said, Shrek is no difference, because people were kind of getting tired of the old Disney stuff, and Shrek is the natural reaction. It's kind of the I think this was actually, I can't remember where I was watching, what I was listening to, and somebody was talking about the trend when it comes to film genres. There is what happens when a film genre gets overdone. So, like, in the 60s and the 70s, the big thing was the Western. And what happens when the Western is going, the Western, they made so many Westerns, so many movies every single year. And it got to be exhausting. And eventually, there's two things that usually result. Is you get the really dark fairy tale, you get the really dark Western, the really, extreme one. That's the one answer. And the other answer is parody. And the parody for the Western was obviously Blazing Saddles. With the superhero genre. So this is brought up in relationship to the superhero genre. In the superhero genre, I guess you could kind of think of maybe Guardians of the Galaxy as a little bit of that humor. No, actually, I take that back. The one that's kind of the satirized would probably be Deadpool. Deadpool was one reaction, then the other reaction was Logan. And so using that kind of logic is you go back to the fairy tale story, the fairy tale animated story. Because notice, Pixar doesn't really fall into this problem because Pixar didn't lean into the fairy tale. Pixar was doing things like Toy Story, Bug's Life. They'd eventually do Cars, Finding Nemo. They didn't do the fairy tale thing. So they weren't really falling into that jadedness. But Disney animation was traditionally doing this. And so Shrek, and I would say a little bit later on, the movie Enchanted, are both the same thing. It's satirical. They're satirizing the fairy tale while still honoring and being respectful of it. Especially because it is aimed towards children. It can't be as jaded as, say, Blazing Saddles was towards the Western. And so Shrek definitely has that satire. And it's satiring fairy tales that go back so far back. Because even the center story is you have the story of a knight rescuing a princess from a dragon, a fire-breathing dragon. It's one of the oldest stories. This motif, this story of the dragon protecting the princess is as old as could be. And I had to pause for a moment. And if you ever notice, like, there's kind of a hiccup, that's because I pause and I have to go look up something. And like I said, everything I do is raw recorded. I don't do editing, just because it takes so much time and everything like that. But anyways, I was looking at us, and I had to research and double check, and I'm like, probably one of the famous ones was Prince George or Saint George and the Dragon. But there is, going back to Greek mythology, there's a long history of it. And Shrek anchors itself on that story. And here's the thing. So I'm a pastor. I'm wearing my clerical collar right now. And so we look at these movies from a Christian perspective. What's the origin of this? What is the origin of the princess being saved from the dragon? Well, the origin actually comes from the scriptures. It comes from Genesis. So Genesis chapter 3. So if you're familiar with Genesis chapter 1, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formed, was void, without form, etc., etc. And then chapter 2, God creates man, he creates the woman. And then chapter 3, so after God has given the commandment that they are to eat of they could eat of the fruit of any tree in the garden, but of the fruit of the tree in the midst of the garden, they shall not eat of it lest they die. And so what you read in here, actually, I'm going to pause again. I'm going to bring up Genesis 3, so you could just read along with it. All right, so I have here my logos open, so I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 3. It says, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that Yahweh," so whenever you see Lord in all capital letters, so I have it highlighted so you can see at the very bottom of the screen it says Yahweh God had made, he said to the woman, "Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, and so here, by the way, here's one of the I got to highlight something for a moment. All right, I'll come back to this. "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and there was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. All right. So why do I read this? Well, the first clue is in this word serpent, which is the Hebrew word is nephesh. So nephesh, there is a possibility. So I'm going to bring up Brown Driver Briggs. Serpent, viper. But here go fleeing serpent talks about a sea monster. Very simply, the big issue is that there are some that have argued that a possible translation for this word is dragon. And so what you have here is a story. This is the very first man, the very first woman, the very first husband, the very first wife. And the job of a husband is to protect his wife, to provide for his wife, to care for his wife, right? In Ephesians chapter 5, Paul tells husbands, love your wives. That husbands are called to be willing to die for his wife, just as Christ died for the church and gave himself up for her. That's the kind of love a husband is supposed to have for his wife. And so when you read about this whole thing, so the dragon, so Satan, the serpent, the dragon, possibly a dragon, is tempting this woman. Where is her husband? Where is Adam? Where is the first husband? It says her husband was with her. So he is there this entire time. So any idea that we just blame the woman for what happened here, does she have blame? Oh yeah, she definitely has blame. But that doesn't mean the man is off the hook. He actually, if you read in the New Testament, I think there's only one time in the New Testament. I mean, I could be wrong. There might be another, but I think the only time I can think of is in 1 Timothy, where the blame of the fall into sin is actually laid at the feet of Eve. More often than not, the blame is laid at Adam's feet. Why? Because he was the husband, and his job was to protect his wife. And he is there the entire time, and he doesn't do anything about it. He doesn't protect her. He failed. So what you have in Genesis chapter 3 is the very first husband failing to protect his wife from a dragon. And hence, that is the reason why so many stories are about the damsel in distress. So many stories are about the prince saving the princess from the dragon. It's because the very first man failed to save his wife from a dragon. And ever since, it's been a lesson to boys that your job, that you are to protect, care for the women in your life, namely, especially your wife. And you do this not because women are weak, can't care for themselves. It's because women are precious. If you read in Genesis 2, what was the very first gift that God gave to the man other than life itself? It was the woman. The woman was a gift to the man, not as much the other way around. And so this is why women are to be treasured. You don't protect things because they're weak. You protect something or someone because they're valued, they're precious, they're lovely, etc., etc. So now, so that is so this is kind of a neat little tracing of the history in Shrek. So he has this, again, the story is based, it's connecting to Genesis 1 or Genesis chapter 3. So even without, I don't know if the creators of Shrek knew that or were mindful of that, but they were definitely mindful of the history of the dragon and the princess, etc., etc. The center message of the movie is not about that. And we do see later that the princess is able to fight really well. I do kind of love that the movie recognizes the craziness of that, because she's been in a tower her entire life. And so they ask the question, like, how did you learn to do that when you're by yourself? And I kind of like how the movie kind of recognizes the ridiculousness of it. So, and I got to give props to it. But the thing is that they do the big thing in this movie, the biggest message, and it's a very simple message that carries throughout the film, and that is self-love. And what I mean by that is, like, how do you view yourself? So you have Shrek, who is rejected by everyone, and people hunt him. They don't even want to get to know him. And this is where it's kind of cool. You know, Donkey's kind of a good moral story. He saw Shrek and he accepted Shrek right away. People that are like that are invaluable. They welcome and accept anyone. They don't immediately think the worst of someone. They just see a person. And you see, for all Donkey's faults, the amazing thing is he's actually, and it's, he talks, but he listens. He's supportive of Shrek, even though Shrek's not very supportive of him. And the thing is that Shrek has convinced himself that he's been so used to being alone, so used to being rejected. He's convinced himself that that's life, that he wants that, but he knows that that's not true. There's in the beginning of the movie, you see him look off for a moment towards Donkey when he's, sitting there to eat, and you realize, and he knows that he actually had somebody that wants to be with him for the first time. What did he do? He threw him out. He's become so used and so buried in his loneliness and his isolation that he doesn't recognize what he needs anymore, even though some part of him realizes he needs it and he wants it. And, he's kind of learned to not like himself. He's learned to hate himself, learned to think the worst in himself. And then you have Fiona on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like Donkey, I don't think Donkey... It's kind of interesting. Does Donkey hate himself or love himself? And the answer is neither. This is a really good answer on self-esteem. When I went to the youth gathering in New Orleans, I sat in with our youth. There's a few others that went there. We sat in on a presentation, and the presentation was why self-esteem is demonic. And it could be seen that this message is dealing with self-esteem. I mean, it isn't dealing... It deals with self-image and how you view yourself and how you value yourself. And it deals with when you devalue yourself, you become lonely, you become isolated. And the answer sometimes is to think, you just got to think better of yourself. And what you actually see in Donkey is the better answer. Because the thing is you actually see the opposite end of the spectrum. What if I told the reality? I'm going to let you in on a secret. Shrek's problem, Fiona's problem, and Lord Farquaad. By the way, Lord Farquaad, I think it's really funny. His logo is a blue F that strikingly looks like the Facebook logo. And Facebook wouldn't exist for another 4 years. I thought that's kind of funny. But anyways, but all three of them have the same problem. They're thinking about themselves too much. Now, the nature of their problem is different. Like, the way it manifests is different. But they all have the same problem. They think too much about themselves. In the case of Lord Farquaad, he has a massive ego. Or, possibly, he has a really low view of himself and he's masquerading behind ego. Whatever the case may be, he has a problem with and because of that, he's a bully. He's cruel to others, and so he's on the opposite end of the spectrum. But you have Fiona. Okay, the movie came out 25 years ago, so I apologize for this spoiler warning. Fiona has a problem. See, when the sun goes by light one way, by night another. Because at night, she transforms into an orc instead of the lovely princess that you see in the image there. And she's terrified that anybody would discover this. And it's kind of interesting when she realizes Shrek is an ogre. When she realizes he's an ogre, she isn't, you could tell, and this is actually good animating and good animation acting. You realize that she's not appalled by Shrek. She's appalled by what she knows she is at night, which looks like Shrek. And this is actually pretty good writing and pretty good directing. That you catch this, the way she's reacting, because if you know what's going on, that's what she's doing. She's not upset that Shrek is Shrek. She's upset that she sees herself in him. And she hates herself. It's not that she doesn't like Shrek, it's that she has a self-hatred towards herself. And the conditioning she's been in. And she's very, very much romanticized how she's going to have a relationship. And by the way, that's a problem that we do have in relationships. Women have this there is a temptation of for women to overly romanticize relationships. And by the way, so do men. Because this is what happened. Why, she's laying there with the flower, waiting to be kissed, and he doesn't do it. He doesn't comply with the image in her head of how she's going to meet her Prince Charming. When I was in college at Concordia University, Wisconsin, there was a group that we developed on Facebook, the early days of Facebook, when Facebook was first getting going. We developed a group that's called Princesses versus Prince Charmings. And because and it was spawned because originally there's a group by this girl that was in her. So I started it along with this other girl, and her group was called "Where Is My Prince Charming?" And this is what we have in Shrek. Shrek is throwing back this longing, this ideal that we over romanticize how we're going to find that one. And guys do the same thing. It may not look the same, but guys romanticize. They over-romanticize the relationship that they're looking for. And the thing is they're disappointed because it never comes their way, or they end up in a relationship and it ends up not being happily ever after. There's trial, there's tribulation, there's there's turbulence, and so they give up on the marriage too soon. And again, Shrek still caves into the problems of fairy tales because of the fact that they get, they have a happily ever after spending 3 days together. Obviously, they still have that problem, and a lot of romantic movies have that problem. But I do at least respect that they're kind of pushing back at some of that romanticization. But like I said, both characters are dealing with this issue that they don't care about. They don't see themselves well. And women, and the thing is I love is, she's got this princess look. And in the end, if it gets revealed that the curse wasn't that when the curse was lifted, it wouldn't be that she would become princess all the time. It would be revealed that she was always an ogre, just like Shrek. And she said last lines like, "I thought I was going to be beautiful." Of course, Shrek says, "You are beautiful." And that's the thing is you realize that she thought she was this one thing, and when she sees what she was really created to be, the mask was the thing that she hid was her real self. And she didn't realize it. But that is what we do, is we're afraid if people saw the real self, our real self, they'd flee. They'd want to bring torches and pitchforks, metaphorically, hopefully. But we're worried that they're going to reject us and cast us away. And Shrek was a living embodiment of that, being rejected and cast away. And so she has good reason to fear that. And, we do the same thing, as we have our face that we give to the world. We don't want to present the person that we really are. And see, here's the thing is, I go back to Donkey. Donkey is actually the answer to this whole problem. Donkey is not obsessed with himself at all. In fact, if you watch through the entire movie, even though he talks a lot, he's not thinking about himself at all. He's only thinking about Shrek, Fiona. When he sees the dragon down, he thinks about her. Rarely does he think about himself. And it's the reason why he's the most emotionally healthy in the movie. And that is kind of a good message. But I want to go a little bit step farther, in that the best person to think of is the answer to the self-esteem problem. When we think little of ourselves, the answer isn't to think more, because that's what self-esteem messaging does. It tells you got to think more about yourself. You got to think better about yourself. No, because the thing is, when you look at yourself more and more, the more you're aware of your failings, your shortcomings. No, the answer isn't to think more about yourself. The answer is to think less about yourself. Think upon your Creator. Think about your God. Think of your neighbor. How you can serve him. The amount that you can think of yourself is think about the gifts that God has given you. Give thanks for the gifts that He's given you, and think about how God can use those gifts to serve others. So, in the context of this movie, she was an ogre. Shrek was an ogre, and the creators of the film created them ogres, and they shouldn't be ashamed of who they are, how they were created to be. And similarly, God created you as you are. Now, do we have our sins? Do we have things that affect us sinfully? Yes. And those are things to confess. But ultimately, God gave us many gifts and talents and abilities. And they're talents and abilities that can be used to serve others. What Shrek did not realize is him being Shrek, him being this ogre, is exactly what Fiona would need to learn to love herself. And Fiona's struggle with being an ogre is exactly what you need to help Shrek, to give him strength and courage. So it is actually a really good movie still, 25 years later. If you have not seen it in a while, sit down, watch. It's on Peacock. It must be on Hulu, according to what you see on the streams right above me. So, blessings. Starting next week, I'm going to do a series of movies building up to the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, the Declaration of Independence. And so, the movies, they're all going to be movies that came out in the years that end in 6, but I think the movies I have on docket is, Rocky, Independence Day, Cars, Letters to Iwo Jima, and I can't remember what the fifth one was. But I have 5 movies on docket that all kind of do well to lead up to 250, and it keeps with my rule about years that end in 6. So, blessings.